So radio has gone through a sea change over the sands of time. But I assure you, as a marketeer and a communications professional, it's only gotten better. So what is this whole mystery thing about radio? Back in the day, I remember my mother used to listen to Mr. Amin Sayani, who was doing the top 20, the countdown. And she would say, you know, I used to conjure up images of Mr. Sayani as an adolescent. And then she finally got to meet him because he was presenting, or he was an MC at a stage show. Likewise, aunts of mine would turn around and say, I heard that countdown, and I would visualize, because radio is the theater of the mind. I would visualize Raj Kapoor approaching Nargis, and I would visualize Devanand in Vaijayantimala's arms and things like that. So there was one platform, which was radio. There was a platform influencer. And there was another platform or individual who was again an influencer. So we're talking two basic entities. And now as a marketeer and a communications professional, you have multiple platforms. It's really simple. Every radio station today has an online stream that goes across the nation or across the country. So you have radio playing on radio sets, which you can use as an influencer. You have radio as an online stream, which goes across the country or across the nation. You have the Facebook Live or the Periscope Live, which is basically a camera. Some radio stations, you know, put out a camera, a broadcast for a couple of hours every day. But there are people like Ryan Seacrest, who's a famous international host, who has a camera in studio all the time. There are radio stations who have 24-hour cameras. So, you know, it's a voyeuristic experience. People can see what's happening even in between songs. There's software being peddled and hardware being peddled saying the camera will be attached to the mic fader, which means when I put up the mic for the guest, a camera will go and do a close-up of the guest. And when I put up my mic, there's a camera which will switch on and do a close-up of me. So all these things are happening. So what do? Instead of me talking about how I'm an influencer, I'd rather just help you understand how you can use radio. So you're sitting there watching all these things happen. And you're questioning, is it still the theater of the mind? Largely, it's gone out through the door. But there are things that you can still do. So there's macro and micro, like one lady said. How do you use celebrity content? How do you use radio presenter content? What do you do on a platform? And what do you do outside the platform if you want to use the radio presenter as an influencer on his own or her own? There are multiple things that you can do. But first, understand your audience. People think that radio audiences can be segmented. So there are people who are playing just CHR, which is current hits radio. There are people who are playing classics, which is retro radio. There are other people, which is still a minority, who are speaking in English and playing English songs. But ask yourself which particular bracket you belong to. The answer is you don't. I'll give you a classic example. In marketing parlance, SSCA, B, I have a friend who is top management at a real estate firm. And he says, man, I really love your conversations because you speak to captains of the industry, you speak to NGOs, sometimes a movie star, sometimes an inventor. So I love your conversations. But I don't understand the Sia and the Selena Gomez and the John Mayer you play. So what does he do? He listens to my conversation, and the moment I go into a song, he loves retro Hindi music. So he flips, and he listens to a retro song on those many stations that are playing retro Hindi music. So he gets his SD Varman, RD Varman, Manna Day, and this and that. And radio stations all do radio edits of songs. Okay, if you ask me why we don't play 7-minute versions of November Rain, or we don't play 9.5-minute versions of Aag Gale Lag Ja, is because we all do radio edits of 3.5 minutes. So chances are 3.5 minutes hence, my conversation will restart. So then he comes back and he samples me again. Now what does that tell you? And when he explained this to me, and sometimes, you know, he asked me for tips, you know, what do I do, man, media buying and this and that. I said, why don't you get a research done? So he commissioned a market research firm, which said pretty much the same thing. People are frittering in and out. They like conversations in English in the urban metros, Bombay, Mumbai in particular, but they might like a particular type of music. And, you know, those are things you can't predict. So what does he do? He goes and tags the retro song in the retro radio station saying, this song is brought to you by. And then he comes to my station, which is an English station, and he tags the conversation saying, this interview is brought to you by. That's a classic example of day-to-day use in terms of sales and marketing and PR. You understand your audience. Then celebrity usage. It's obvious that all celebrities go from station to station to do trails when their movies appear. It's no secret. They go to the Kapil Sharma show, come to my show, they go to Malishka's show, everybody's show. The trick is, how do you as a marketer, you as a brand professional, try and use a movie star to your advantage? It takes a little bit of thought and a little bit of editorial. We figured out, for example, a few years ago, when we were doing a show called Youth Star, that Anushka Sharma had been through the whole grind of being a single woman in Mumbai city, going with a broker from place to place, trying to rent an apartment, going to studios and doing auditions, trying to invest in mutual funds. So there was a brand that wanted a solution. So we approached her and said, you know, we want to talk about you as a single woman in the city. And she agreed. Then we found out that Arjun Kapoor is a car freak. We said, we don't want to talk to you about your movie and aapka character kya and this and that. Can we create a show around cars, where you just talk cars with our radio presenter? And there were enough automotive clients who turned around and said, that's great branding. You know, he's talking about cars and he's talking about SUVs he's been in. He's talking about journeys that he's gone on. I mean, I could go on and on. There's Ranveer saying this with travel. So the idea is to try and do a form of marketing that is not blatant in the face. Most of you know that. So that's platform engagement. Now, when you come to an individual radio presenter, again, only radio listenership will tell you where he or she stands, what she's good at, what she's perhaps inclined towards. Some people are getting it right, some people are not. For example, there's a female radio presenter who's a little petrified of the water, and she, because she was getting paid a lot of money, went deep sea diving in the Maldives, and that was a disaster. Now, if you get a guy like me to go and do a food trail for you, that's a great idea, because you can obviously see that I love food. So then you tap into the influencer from a solo perspective and say, you know, you've got a Twitter following, you've got a Facebook following, you've got an Insta following. What can we do that really synergizes things for us as a brand? Now, again, people are underestimating the use of pure audio. You look at stuff that's being done in terms of NPR in the West. You look at the kind of podcasting that's happening right now, which is still in its nascent stage in India, and you realize that too is radio. As opposed to terrestrial radio, which goes over the airwaves, that's going over the internet. Some people say that's the future, some people say that's the present, but the fact is it's happening. The problem is, most people who are turning around and doing podcasts are saying, oh, you can be risque in podcasts. You know, you can use expletives, you can have sexual content and things like that. Sooner or later, that's going to die down. The idea of attracting an individual radio influencer to do a podcast based on it being more risque is a bad idea. What I would imagine, if you were a communications or a marketing professional, is what perhaps a few of us are doing, which is tap into what we're not doing on the radio. Tap into what we're not doing on our daily morning and evening shows. I'll give you a classic example. I don't do as much cricket on the radio, but I'm crazy about cricket. I'm nuts about cricket as a fan, not as an expert. And we suddenly built a podcast which had me, the cricket fan, talking to two other cricket fans, sometimes yelling and arguing with each other, sometimes choosing to agree to disagree, and we called it Cricket Mahabharat. And that made sense. There again, there have been disastrous consequences where a popular OTT platform has taken a large presenter, a mainstream terrestrial presenter, and said, you know, your celebrity interviews are doing really good, so why don't you come on to our podcast platform and also do the same thing for us? It doesn't involve too much of a problem for you because, you know, you're interviewing Akshay Kumar in any case. Just move him to the next room and do another recording. That podcast didn't get a second season. So, again, as a marketing and communications professional, it's really simple. It's staring you in the face. What is not on terrestrial radio is achievable at a podcast level, because that still is theater of the mind. I'd like to end with a song of Queen's, which I really love. You know, it's Roger Taylor. Freddie Mercury didn't write that song, incidentally. Everybody thinks Freddie Mercury wrote that song. It's actually Roger Taylor from Queen, and, you know, it's a no-brainer. We've yet to have our finest hour, Radio Gaga. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience. Cheers.